My father destroyed my childhood at 8 when he whispered, "This will be our little secret, princess." Hello, my dears. My name is Marina, but you can call me Grandma Lena. I'm 68 years old, and I was born in a small town in Nebraska in 1957. Today, I'm going to share a story I've kept in my heart for over 60 years, a story that even my children don't fully know. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you a heartfelt question. Who are the most special people in your life? Leave your answers in the comments so I can get to know you better. And also let me know which state you're watching this life story from. Remember to like this video and subscribe to this channel. It supports me so much. Now, let's continue. Our house was simple but beautiful. It was an Oakwood neighborhood, a place that was full of hard-working families back then. My father, Anthony, was a mechanic with a small garage behind our house. My mother, Claire, worked as a seamstress, doing alterations and small repairs for the whole neighborhood. We were what people called a good family, the kind that goes to church every Sunday, keeps a clean house, and doesn't owe anyone anything. I was an only child, a gift from God. My mother always said she had suffered 3 miscarriages before me, and doctors told her it was almost impossible for her to have children. When I was born, it was such a big surprise that my parents treated me like a miracle. "Marina is our treasure," my father would tell visitors. "There's no money in the world that can pay for this girl's smile." And I smiled a lot when I was little. I liked playing with my cloth dolls that my mother made, running around the yard, chasing chickens, drawing with chalk on the sidewalk in front of our house. I was a happy child, the kind who believes the world is good and people only want what's best for us. How wrong we were. The first time I noticed something strange, I was 6 years old. I was taking a bath when my father entered the bathroom without knocking. I felt embarrassed, tried to cover myself with my hands, but he said, "Don't be silly, Marina. I'm your father. You don't need to be shy around me." And he stayed there watching me bathe with a smile that today I know wasn't normal at the time. I thought it was just in my head. After all, he was my father. Fathers protect their daughters. They don't hurt them. When I was 7, the routine of special affection began. My father had always been affectionate, picking me up, hugging me, kissing my cheek. He was loving. Everyone commented on it. "Anthony is such a great dad," the neighbors would say. But gradually this affection began to change. A hug that lasted too long, a hand that rested where it shouldn't, a kiss that came too close to my mouth. "It's because I love you more than anything in this world," he justified when I became tense. "A father has the right to love his daughter however he wants." My mother worked a lot. She left early to pick up and deliver sewing jobs, came home late, often so tired she could barely eat dinner before falling into bed. And my father took advantage of these absences. At first, it was just quick touches, a caress on my back that went too low, a kiss on the cheek that slipped to my neck, small invasions that he disguised as demonstrations of fatherly affection. "Our little girl is getting so pretty," he would say as he ran his hand through my hair. "You're going to break a lot of hearts when you grow up." I didn't really understand what was happening. I only knew that it made me uncomfortable with a knot in my stomach and the urge to run. But where to? It was my home. It was my father, the man who was supposed to protect me from harm. When I turned 8, things got worse. It was on a night in January, unusually cold for Springfield, Illinois, which was rare in that region. My mother had gone to bed early, complaining of back pain after a whole day bent over her sewing machine. I was in the living room watching television wrapped in a blanket when my father sat down next to me on the couch. "Come here, princess," he said, opening his arms. "Come warm your dad up." I went without thinking twice. He was my father after all, the hero of my childhood. The man who fixed my broken toys, who took me for ice cream on Sundays after church, who told me stories before bedtime. He pulled me onto his lap, covering me with the blanket. At first, it seemed normal. A father hugging his daughter on a cold night. But then his hands started to move under the blanket where no one could see, touching places that no one should touch on a child. "Dad, this is strange," I said, trying to move away. "No, it's not strange, Princess," he whispered in my ear. "This is how fathers show love to their daughters, but it's our little secret, okay? Your mother wouldn't understand. She would be jealous. Our little secret." How those words haunt me to this day, as if it were a game, a special thing that only we shared. It wasn't. It was the beginning of the abuse that would destroy my childhood. That night, after he finished what he wanted to do to me, he sent me to my room with a warning. "If you tell anyone, they'll take you away. They'll put you in an orphanage where children are mistreated. You don't want that, do you?" I was 8 years old. I believed him. Of course I believed him. He was my father. Why would he lie to me? From that day on, a new routine was established in our house. During the day, we were the perfect family. My father, the respected neighborhood mechanic, my mother, the talented seamstress. Me, the well-behaved little girl who got good grades at school. But at night, when my mother slept exhausted from work, our home turned into a nightmare scenario. He would come to my room always after making sure that my mother was sound asleep. He would open the door slowly without making a sound. "Sit on the edge of my bed, Princess," he would whisper. "Time for our little secret." And I would pretend to be asleep, pretend to be somewhere else, pretend to be someone else. I would create entire worlds in my head while he did what he wanted with my body. I imagined I was flying above the clouds, swimming at the bottom of the sea, running through fields of flowers, anything to escape the reality of that dark room. At school, I began to change. The smiling, talkative Marina started to disappear, giving way to a quiet girl with a distant look. My grades began to fall. I didn't want to play with the other children anymore. I preferred to be alone, drawing in corners, creating stories where girls like me were saved by guardian angels. "What's happening with you?" my teacher, Mrs. Wilson, asked one day. "You seem sad," I almost told her. I almost let our little secret slip. But then I remembered the threat, the orphanage, the mistreatment, and more. What would happen to my mother? She loved my father so much. How would she feel if she knew the truth? "Nothing, teacher," I replied. "I'm just tired." Tired? What a weak word to describe what I felt. I was exhausted. Exhausted from pretending, exhausted from smiling when I wanted to cry, exhausted from living two lives. The normal girl during the day, the victim at night. My mother also started to notice the changes. "Marina, you're losing weight," she would say as she measured my waist for a new dress. "And those dark circles? Aren't you sleeping well?" If only she knew why. If only she could imagine what happened after she closed her eyes, overcome by the day's fatigue. But how could I tell her? How could I destroy our family? How could I make her see that the man she shared her bed with was a monster disguised as a loving father? So I lied. "I'm fine, Mum. I'm just studying a lot." The years went by, and the abuse continued. From 8 to 12, I lived a double life. To the world, I was the daughter of Mr. Anthony and Mrs. Clare. A well-mannered girl who helped her mother with the sewing and did well in school despite the ups and downs. At home at night, I was the victim of a predator who should have been my protector. My friends, this part of the story is very difficult to tell. Sometimes I feel like the words get stuck in my throat even after so many decades. But I feel I need to share because I know there are many Marlenas out there suffering in silence, thinking they're alone. They're not. I understand this pain. I went through it, and I'm here to say there is a way out. If you're watching from somewhere in the United States, tell me in the comments. It makes me feel less alone in this journey of sharing my story. And don't forget to leave a like, okay? It helps this grandma reach more people with this message. When I turned 12, something changed in the dynamics of our house. My mother started getting more sewing orders. A store downtown had contracted her services, which meant more money, but also more work. She spent entire days away from home, delivering and picking up jobs. "Take care of Marina for me," she would ask my father before leaving. "Don't leave her alone." And he would reply with that smile that gave me chills. "Don't worry, Claire. I'll take care of our princess like no one else." With my mother spending more time away, my father became bolder. He no longer waited for her to fall asleep to come to my room. Now he approached me as soon as she left. In the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the living room, any room in the house became the setting for my nightmare. "We're getting closer, aren't we, princess?" he would say as he touched me. "It's our special secret. I was no longer the innocent child who believed everything he said." At 12, I already understood that it was wrong, that fathers shouldn't touch their daughters that way, that this secret was actually a crime. But fear still paralyzed me. Fear of what would happen if I told. Fear of destroying our family. Fear that no one would believe me. My body began to change. I entered puberty, and that only made the situation worse. My father seemed fascinated by the changes, commenting on them in a way that made me want to disappear. "You're turning into a beautiful young lady," he would say, watching me change clothes through the crack in the door. "Soon you'll be a woman." The word woman in his mouth sounded like a threat, as if he were counting the days for something worse to happen. And I was counting the days too, but for something else, to grow up, move out, escape that hell. At school, my science teacher explained about child abuse during a class. She talked about inappropriate touches, about adults who take advantage of children, about the importance of telling someone you trust if this happened. I sat frozen at my desk, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was as if she were describing my life, as if she knew my secret. After class, she called me over. "Marina, are you okay? You turned so pale during the explanation." Again, I almost told her. The words were on the tip of my tongue. "My father has been abusing me since I was 8. Please help me." But then I thought about my mother, how hard she worked to maintain our home, how much she loved my father despite everything. "I'm fine, teacher, just a little tired." Tired. Always the same excuse, always the same lie. At 13, I began to resist. Not physically. I was still too afraid for that. But by creating barriers, I locked the bathroom door when I took a shower. I invented headaches when he tried to hug me. I slept with the light on, knowing he preferred darkness for his nightly visits. "You're different, princess," he commented, irritated after I refused one of his special hugs. "You're pulling away from your father." "I'm growing up," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I'm not a child anymore." That seemed to make him even more irritated. "It doesn't matter how much you grow. You'll always be my little girl." The way he said mine gave me chills, as if I were property, an object he could use as he wished. It was during this time that I began to think about running away. I fantasized about catching a bus to Chicago, finding a job, starting a new life away from that house, from that man. But where would a 13-year-old girl go? Who would give a job? Housing. I would end up on the streets or worse, and my mother. How would she be without me? So, I continued pretending, continued surviving, continued waiting for a miracle that seemed never to come. At 14, I met Lucy, a new neighbor who moved into the house next door. She was my age, but seemed older, smarter, more experienced. We quickly became friends, and for the first time in years, I felt I had someone I could trust. One afternoon, we were alone in her room listening to records and talking about boys from school when she asked me something that changed everything. "Marina, why do you always get tense when your father comes near?" The question caught me off guard. I didn't know it was so obvious. I thought about denying it, about making up some excuse, but I was tired. So tired of carrying that secret alone. "Lucy, if I tell you something, do you promise not to tell anyone?" Of course, we're friends. And I told her for the first time. I let the words out. I told her about the touches, the night visits, the little secret. I told her how it had started when I was 8 and had never stopped. I told her about the fear, the shame, the confusion. Lucy turned pale. Tears streamed down her face as I spoke. When I finished, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Marina, this is abuse," she said, her voice trembling. "Your father, he's a monster. You need to tell your mother." "I can't," I replied, crying too. "She loves him. It would destroy our family." "He's already destroying you," Lucy argued. "And what if he doesn't stop? What if it gets worse? I couldn't sleep that night." Lucy's words echoed in my head. What if it gets worse? What could be worse than what was already happening? The answer came faster than I could imagine. The conversation with Lucy planted a seed of courage inside me, but fear was still greater. I had just turned 14, and to my despair, my body was developing in a way that attracted even more of my father's sick attention. He couldn't take his eyes off me when I walked around the house, always with that look that made me feel dirty, as if he were undressing me with his eyes. "Marlena, you're looking so much like your mother when she was young," he would comment in front of visitors, putting his arm around my shoulders in a way that seemed innocent to those watching from the outside. So beautiful, but much prettier. My mother would smile, thinking it was a compliment. Little did she know what those words really meant. What happened when she wasn't looking, the way his hand squeezed my shoulder, went down my back when no one was paying attention. The abuse became more frequent and more intense. If before he waited for my mother to fall asleep, now he took advantage of any moment we were alone. In the morning before she woke up, during the day when she went out to deliver sewing at night, pretending he was saying goodnight to me. "Princess, you're getting more beautiful every day," he would whisper, coming into my room at night. "You know how special you are to your dad, don't you?" I would close my eyes and try to transport myself somewhere else, as I always did. I imagined green fields, deserted beaches, snow-covered mountains, anywhere but that room, that house, that life. But it was getting harder and harder to escape mentally. The horror was too real, too present, too suffocating. I began to show physical signs of trauma. I lost weight drastically. School uniforms looked like they were hanging on a coat hanger when I wore them. My nails were always bitten to the quick. I had night spasms, waking up screaming from nightmares that were nothing compared to the reality I lived. My mother started to get really worried. "Honey, are you sick? Do you need to see a doctor?" How could I explain that my illness couldn't be cured with medicine? That the poison consuming me lived under the same roof, ate at the same table, was the man she loved? "It's just school stress, Mom. It'll pass." At school, my performance plummeted completely. I, who had always been a good student, could barely concentrate in class. My mind was always alert, always in panic, always exhausted from pretending everything was fine. "Is Marina having problems at home?" my English teacher asked my mother during a school meeting. Not that I know of, my mother replied, confused. We're a peaceful family. Peaceful? How ironic. Our house was a silent battlefield where I fought alone every night against an enemy no one else could see. At 15, the nightmare intensified. My father started following me when I went out with my friends. He would coincidentally show up at the ice cream parlor where we were, at the movie theater door, at the park where we chatted. He was watching me, controlling me, as if he was afraid I would tell someone. And I was afraid too. Afraid of what he would do if he knew I had told Lucy. Afraid of what would happen if anyone else found out. Afraid that no one would believe me. Your father is so attentive, commented a friend from school after he offered to give us a ride. Always worried about you. If only she knew the true nature of that concern. If only she could see through that mask of a loving father. It was around this time that he started giving me gifts in exchange for the abuse. A new blouse I had commented on in the window display, a pair of shoes that all the girls at school were wearing, a silver bracelet on my birthday. It's our little secret, he would say, handing me the package after another night of horror. Your mother doesn't need to know how much it cost. I hated those gifts. Each one was an invisible chain that bound me even more to silence, that transformed me into an accomplice of my own abuse. But I accepted them because what else could I do? In 1973, when I was almost 16, a family tragedy brought a temporary change to our routine. My maternal grandmother suffered a stroke and needed constant care. My mother decided to spend 2 weeks at her house in Cedar Falls to help. Will you be okay with your father? She asked, worried about leaving me. I wanted to scream, no, take me with you. Don't leave me alone with him. But I just smiled and said, of course, Mom. Everything will be fine. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Without the shield of my mother's presence, even if she had never noticed what was happening, my father became even more daring, more violent, more insatiable. Now it's just the two of us, Princess, he said on the first night after my mother travelled. You don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to hide anymore. During the day, I would go to school and stay there as long as possible. I made up group assignments, extracurricular activities, anything to avoid going home. But night always came, and with it the inevitable. It was during this period that I met Carlos, a boy from school who started showing interest in me. He was kind, respectful, completely different from the man I called father. When he invited me out, I immediately accepted, seeing a chance to escape home for a few hours. We met at the Central Park on a Saturday afternoon. It was my first date, my first attempt to have something normal in life. Carlos held my hand as we walked, bought me ice cream, made me laugh with silly stories about the school's football team. For a few hours, I forgot about my nightmare, forgot about what was waiting for me at home. When he gave me a goodbye kiss, an innocent and sweet kiss, as any teenager's first kiss should be, I felt a mix of emotions. Joy for that moment of normalcy, sadness for knowing that my life was far from normal, and terror when I realized that my father was standing on the other side of the park watching us. Who was that boy? He asked as soon as I entered the house, grabbing my arm with such force that it left marks. What were you doing with him? He's just a friend from school, I replied, trying to break free. I don't want you meeting boys, he growled. His eyes darkened with anger. You're my daughter, mine. That word, mine, came out of his mouth like a prison sentence, as if I were an object, property, something he owned and not a person with my own will and desires. Dad, I'm growing up. I tried to argue, finding courage from somewhere. It's normal to go out with friends. Normal? He laughed, a laugh that froze my blood. You think you know what's normal? Think you understand the world out there? That boy only wants one thing from you, and you know what it is. The irony of those words hit me like a slap. He who for years had taken from me what no father should ever want from his own daughter, accusing me of impurity. He, the predator of my childhood, pretending to protect me from imaginary dangers. That night, the punishment for my behavior was the worst abuse I had suffered until then. For the first time, I seriously thought about ending it all, about taking my grandmother's blood pressure pills that my mother kept in the bathroom cabinet and swallowing them all at once, about using my father's razor to cut my wrists, about simply disappearing. But then I thought about my mother, how she would suffer if I left, how she would blame herself, never knowing the truth. And a small part of me, a part that still believed in the future, whispered, "Hold on. One day this will end." When my mother returned from Cedar Falls, she noticed something was different. I was thinner, paler, quieter than ever. "What happened while I was away?" she asked, stroking my hair on a rare night when we were alone in the kitchen. "Did you and your father argue?" I opened my mouth to speak, to tell everything. The truth was there, ready to come out, to finally be freed after so many years trapped in my throat. Mom, Dad. But at that moment I heard the front door open. He was home, and fear, that old acquaintance, paralyzed me again. "Nothing, Mom. I just missed you." A few weeks after this episode, Lucy, my friend and only confidant, sought me out with a grave expression. "Marina, I can't stand seeing what's happening to you anymore. If you don't tell your mother, I'll tell her myself." Panic overtook me. "No, Lucy, you promised he'll kill me if he knows I told." "He's killing you slowly anyway," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "Look at you. You're withering away, disappearing before our eyes." She was right. Each abuse took a piece of my soul, of my will to live. It was turning me into an empty shell, a ghost of the girl I once was. "Give me some time," I begged. "I'll find a way to tell my mother, but it has to be my way in my time." Lucy reluctantly agreed, but gave me an ultimatum. "By the end of the month, if you don't tell by then, I will." That ultimatum lit a fuse inside me. I had to act, had to do something. But what? How to break this cycle of abuse that had already lasted almost half my life? That's when I started planning my escape. I gathered the little money I had saved from birthday and Christmas presents. I researched buses to Chicago, where a distant cousin lived. I thought about writing a letter to my mother explaining everything, leaving it for her to find after I was already far away. But while I was working on this plan, something terrible was being prepared in the shadows, something that would forever change the course of my life, my mother's life, our entire family. My father must have noticed my restlessness, my whispers with Lucy, my distant looks as I planned my escape. Maybe he noticed the money I hid under the mattress, or overheard a conversation about Chicago. What I know is that he decided it was time to take drastic measures to ensure my silence once and for all in the most vile way possible. And so we come to that night, the night that divided my life into before and after. The night that even after more than 50 years still makes me wake up screaming in the darkest hours. It was a Friday, August 10th, 1973. I'll never forget that date. It's engraved in my soul like a scar that never completely disappears. I had just turned 16 the previous month. The summer was ending in Springfield, Illinois. Those days when the heat was already beginning to show signs during the day, but the night still kept a freshness that made you sleep well. My mother had gone to visit an important client in the Westwood neighborhood, a wealthy lady who always asked for exclusive dresses. It was a job that paid well and Mom couldn't refuse. "I'll be back before 10, she promised before leaving, kissing my forehead, as she had done since I was little. I stayed at home alone with him. My stomach was already twisting, just thinking about what was to come. In recent days, my father had been different. Quieter, more observant, as if he were planning something. His eyes followed me around the house in a way that was different even from his usual behavior. I decided to stay in my room, door locked, pretending to study for a test. In reality, I was organizing my escape plan. I had collected almost 200 years of savings, hidden coins, some bills I managed to keep from his gifts without him noticing. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for the bus ticket to Chicago and a few days of food until I found my cousin. Around 80, he knocked on my door. "Marina, I made tea for you. Open the door." I found it strange. My father never did anything in the kitchen. That was women's work, as he always said. "I don't want any, Dad. I'm studying." "Come on, Princess. It's chamomile tea. It'll help you relax for the test. I know you've been nervous." There was something in his voice, a false sweetness that gave me chills, but I knew that if I didn't open, he would keep knocking, insisting, and eventually lose patience. It was better to deal with him calm than furious. I opened the door just enough to take the cup. "Thank you," I murmured, trying to close it again, but he was faster, putting his foot in the crack. "Aren't you going to drink it in front of me? I made it especially for you." I looked at the yellowish liquid in the cup. It looked normal, ordinary chamomile tea, but something inside me screamed in alert. "I'm busy, Dad. I'll drink it later." "Drink it now," he insisted, and his tone changed. It was no longer a request. It was an order. "I want to see you drinking it." At that moment, I was sure there was something wrong with the tea, but what could I do? If I refused, he could force me. If I threw it away, he would see. I was cornered as I had always been since I was 8 years old. Then I had an idea. I pretended to bring the cup to my lips, tilting it slowly. "It's hot," I complained, buying time. "Blow on it then," he said, impatient. I made 2 more pretend sips, bringing the cup to my mouth without actually drinking. "It's good, Dad. Thank you." But he didn't move. He stood there watching, waiting. "Drink it all. I made it for you to relax." I understood that I had no way out. I took a small sip, hoping that whatever it was, in small quantity, it wouldn't harm me. The tea had a slightly bitter taste, different from normal chamomile. I hoped it was just my impression. "See, it wasn't so hard." He smiled finally, taking his foot off the door. "Drink the rest and rest a bit. You've been very tense." I closed the door as soon as he walked away and ran to the window. I opened it and threw the rest of the tea into the bushes in the yard. Something told me that drink wasn't just chamomile, and my instinct, developed by years of survival, rarely erred. I went back to my books to my escape plan. But about 20 minutes later, I began to feel a strange numbness. My vision became slightly blurred, my limbs heavy. Even the little I had drunk was taking effect. I tried to fight against the feeling, getting up, walking around the room, throwing water on my face. That's when I heard the door open. I hadn't realized he had a spare key. How could I have been so careless? "Is the tea taking effect, Princess?" His voice seemed to come from far away, although he was standing at the door of my room. I tried to scream, but my tongue felt like cotton. I tried to run, but my legs didn't obey properly. "What? What did you put in the tea?" I managed to ask, the words coming out slurred. "Just something to help you relax. To enjoy our special moment." Our special moment. Those words caused me a terror like I had never felt before. This wasn't like the other times. There was something different in his eyes, something calculated, premeditated. I tried to crawl away as he approached, but my body wasn't responding as it should. It was like being trapped inside myself, aware of everything, but unable to react. "Dad, no. Please. Shh, Princess. It's going to be different today." very special. What happened next is difficult to put into words, even after so many years. The drug, which I later found out was a strong sedative mixed with the tea, didn't make me completely pass out. I was in a state of semi-sea consciousness, able to understand everything that was happening, but unable to react, to fight, to flee. It was like being trapped in a nightmare where you try to scream, but no sound comes out. Try to run, but your legs don't move. Try to wake up, but you're fully aware of reality. I felt his touch, heard his breathing, noticed every movement, but I was paralyzed, powerless, as if I were watching a horrible movie in which I was the helpless protagonist. At some point, in the middle of that horror, I heard a noise in the living room, the front door opening, footsteps in the hallway, my mother's voice. Anthony, Marina. I got home early. Mrs. Johnson wasn't feeling well. For the first time, I saw panic in my father's eyes. He hadn't expected her to return so early. He hadn't planned for this. "Anthony, where are you?" The footsteps were approaching the room. My father tried to quickly compose himself, tried to cover up the evidence of what he was doing, but it was too late. The bedroom door opened completely, and there was my mother. Her face, which had always been so sweet, transformed into a mask of horror at the scene before her. Her eyes widened. The purse she was holding fell to the floor with a dull thud. My God in heaven. What's happening here? It was as if time stopped. My father froze where he was. I, still under the effect of the drug, tried to speak, tried to move, but could only emit incoherent sounds. "Claire, it's not what you're thinking," my father began, his voice trembling for the first time since I'd known him. "The girl is sick with a fever. I was just shut up." I had never heard my mother scream like that. She, always so contained, so soft, screamed with a force that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Get away from her now. My father tried to approach her, tried to touch her arm, explain, invent some excuse, but my mother backed away as if his touch burned. "Don't touch me. Don't come near me." She ran to where I was, semi-conscious on the bed. "Marina, my God, what did he do to you? Honey, talk to me." I tried to answer, but my tongue still didn't obey properly. "Mom, tea." He put medicine. Even in my condition, I could see understanding dawn in her eyes. And then something I had never seen before. Pure hatred, primordial, the kind of fury that only a mother can feel when she realizes her child has been hurt. She turned to my father, who was still trying to explain himself, stammering excuses. What happened next was etched in my memory as if it were yesterday. My mother, that small and delicate woman, flew at him with the force of a lioness. She beat his chest with her fists, scratching, screaming words I had never heard come from her mouth. "Monster, demon, how could you? Your own daughter!" My father, caught by surprise, backed up until he hit the wall. I had never seen fear in his eyes before, but at that moment he was terrified. For the first time, he wasn't in control. "Claire, you're crazy. You're going to kill me," he shouted as my mother continued her assault. "That's the idea," she screamed back. Even in my drugged state, I understood what was happening. My mother could kill my father right then, and she would go to prison for it. Our lives, already shattered, would be completely destroyed. Gathering all the strength I could find, I dragged myself to the edge of the bed and shouted, my voice still slurred from the drug, "Mom, stop. He's not worth it." Something in my cry made her pause. She looked at me, then at the scissors in her hand covered with his blood, and then at her own apron, also stained red. My God, what am I doing? Taking advantage of this moment of hesitation, my father ran to the front door. I heard his hurried footsteps, the door opening and closing forcefully. He had fled. My mother dropped the scissors and ran to me, hugging me, crying like I'd never seen before. Daughter, forgive me. Forgive me for not noticing. How could I be so blind? How could I not see what was happening in my own home? I finally managed to hug her back, my arms regaining some movement. It wasn't your fault, Mom. Yes, it was. It was my duty to protect you. And I failed. I failed terribly. We embraced and cried together. Two broken hearts trying to comfort each other in the middle of a nightmare. When I finally recovered enough from the drug's effect to speak clearly, I told her everything from the first inappropriate touch when I was 8 years old to that night. Every abuse, every threat, every manipulation. It was like releasing 8 years of stored poison of corrosive secrets. My mother listened to everything in silence, tears streaming down her face, occasionally nodding, holding my hands tightly. Why didn't you tell me before, honey? I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't believe me. Afraid of destroying our family. What family? She asked, her voice bitter. A family built on lies and pain isn't a family. It's a prison. That same night she called the police. When the officers arrived, she told them everything she had seen, everything I had revealed. They took our statements looking around with serious expressions. Mom, you attacked your husband with a deadly weapon, said one of the officers. That's attempted homicide. It was self-defense, my mother replied without hesitation. He was drugging and abusing my daughter. I would do it again if I had to. The other officer, older and with a kinder demeanor, nodded. Will recorded as defense of a minor in a flagrant situation. But we need to take the girl to the hospital for tests. The hospital was another ordeal. Invasive exams, embarrassing questions, looks of pity and judgment. But the important thing is that they confirmed the presence of sedatives in my system and evidence of prolonged abuse. My father didn't return home that night or the next. In fact, he fled Springfield, trying to escape justice and shame. But he wouldn't get far. That night changed everything. The secret had been exposed, the mask torn off, the monster revealed. And although the pain was immense, although the road ahead seemed frightening and uncertain, for the first time in 8 years I felt I could breathe. The nightmare wasn't over. In fact, in many ways it was just beginning. But now, I wasn't alone anymore. I had my mother by my side, ready to fight with me, to protect me as she always should have, and that made all the difference in the world. The days following that night were like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Everything we knew as family, as life, had collapsed, and we were trying to find balance amid the rubble. My mother didn't leave my side for a single second during that first week. She slept in the same bed as me, accompanied me to the bathroom, waited at the school gate when classes ended. It was as if she was trying to make up in days for what she hadn't noticed in years. I won't fail you again, she repeated, holding my hands in hers. Never again. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The neighbors who used to smile and wave now closed their curtains when we passed by. Some, especially the older ones, looked at my mother with disapproval, as if she had betrayed her husband by reporting him, not the other way around. Don't look at them, my mother would say, when she noticed my discomfort with the stairs. They know nothing. They haven't lived what we've lived. My father was found 3 days later in Peoria, a city about 75 miles from Springfield. He was hiding at a cousin's house, planning to flee to Indiana. The police arrested him without resistance. According to the report, he seemed resigned, as if he knew he couldn't escape forever. When I heard about the arrest, I felt a confusing mix of emotions. Relief knowing he couldn't hurt me anymore. Anger for all the years of abuse, sadness for what could have been and never was. And as strange as it seems, a tiny bit of guilt. that irrational guilt that victims carry, as if somehow they were responsible for their own suffering. "You have no blame for anything," Lucy would tell me whenever she noticed this feeling in me. "He was the adult. He was your father. All the blame is his." The legal process began in September 1973. It was one of the first child abuse cases to gain visibility in Springfield, a city where such things were usually swept under the rug, treated as family problems that should stay behind closed doors. What surprises Brazilians in the USA? The judge, Dr. Roberts, was a serious man in his 50s, with eyes that seemed to see through people. When I entered the courtroom for the first time, trembling and frightened, he looked at me with a kindness I hadn't expected. "I know it's difficult to be here," he said, his voice calm and measured. "But you're doing the right thing. You're protecting not only yourself, but other children who could be victims in the future." I had never thought of it that way, that my pain could somehow prevent the pain of others, that my voice, silenced for so long, could now make a difference. I had to testify several times during the trial, tell and retell every detail of the abuse. From the first inappropriate touches to that last night, it was like reliving the trauma repeatedly, ripping bandages off wounds that had barely begun to heal. My father's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was a thin man with small, voracious eyes. His strategy was clear from the beginning. Discredit me. Insinuate that I was making up stories. Suggest that I was a troubled teenager, wanting attention. "Don't you find it strange that you never told anyone in all these years?" he would ask, his voice loaded with forced disbelief. "Not your mother, not teachers, not doctors." "I told my friend Lucy," I replied, my voice trembling but determined. "And he threatened me, said no one would believe me." Just as no one should believe now, he insinuated, provoking immediate protest from the prosecutor and a severe reprimand from the judge. My mother suffered as much as I did during the trial. Besides dealing with the crushing guilt of not having noticed the abuse, she had to face accusations of having attacked my father with scissors. "Don't you think you reacted excessively?" asked the defense attorney. "After all, you could have called the police instead of trying to take justice into your own hands." When I saw that man, my husband, abusing my drugged daughter, she replied without looking away, "I saw nothing but red. I didn't think, I just acted. Any mother would have done the same." The trial dragged on for almost 6 months. 6 months of coming and going to the courthouse, of painful testimonies, of invasive questions, of looks of pity and judgment. 6 months in which I had to relive the worst period of my life under the scrutiny of strangers. School became a minefield. Some classmates kept their distance as if abuse was contagious. Others whispered in the hallways when I passed by. There were even those who said I had provoked my own father, that I had asked for it somehow. "Don't listen to them," Lucy would say, my faithful shield in the midst of the storm. "They're ignorant. They don't know what they're talking about, but the words hurt anyway." Each whisper, each look, each muffled laugh was like salt in open wounds. The teachers tried to help in their own way. Some were too kind, treating me as if I were made of crystal, about to break at any moment. Others pretended nothing had happened in a clumsy attempt at normally. The principal, Mrs. Johnson, called me to her office one day and said something I've never forgotten. "Marlena, what happened to you was terrible, but it doesn't define who you are or who you will become. Remember that." In the midst of all this, my mother and I had to reinvent our lives from scratch. The mechanic shop that my father maintained behind our house was our main source of income. With him in jail, we were left with only her sewing work, which barely paid the bills. "I'll need to work more," she said, deep dark circles marking her once vibrant face. I'll take more orders, work longer shifts. I can get a job after school, I suggested, wanting to ease her burden. No, she was firm. Your only obligation now is to study and heal. Let me take care of the rest. And so she did. She would wake up at 5 arcs in the morning, so until it was time to take me to school, then continue until late at night. Gradually her clientele increased. Doctors' wives, lawyers' wives, women from Springfield society who admired her work and, in some cases, her courage. Your mother is a warrior, said Mrs. Olson, one of her oldest clients, when she came to pick up a dress at our house. Not every woman stands up to her husband and society to protect her daughter. In December 1973, the sentence finally came. My father was sentenced to 12 years in prison for statutory rape and other related crimes. The judge made a point of emphasizing the seriousness of the case and the abuse of trust involved. Brazil, history, map, culture, population, and facts. Britannica. Society entrusts parents with the most sacred of missions to protect and educate their children, said Judge Roberts in reading the sentence. When that trust is broken in the vilest way possible, justice must be rigorous and exemplary. When we left the courthouse that day, I felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. He was in prison. He could no longer hurt me. Justice had been done, at least on paper. But the healing journey was just beginning. At the suggestion of the social worker who followed our case, I began therapy with Dr. Martha, a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma. At first, it was difficult to talk. The words got stuck in my throat. The feelings were too nebulous to be translated into coherent sentences. There's no need to rush, Dr. Martha would tell me with that calm voice that became my safe harbor. Healing is not a straight line. There are good days and bad days. The important thing is to move forward one step at a time. One step at a time. That became my mantra in the months that followed. When nightmares woke me in the middle of the night, sweating cold and screaming. When panic attacks left me breathless in the middle of class. When the mere sight of a man who resembled my father made me freeze in terror, one step at a time. My mother also started therapy. Guilt was consuming her, turning her black hair into grey strands almost overnight. She blamed herself for not noticing, for not protecting me, for bringing that man into our lives. It was never your fault, I would repeat, in a role reversal where the daughter tried to comfort the mother. You didn't know. And when you found out, you did everything right. In January 1974, we made a difficult but necessary decision to sell our house. Those walls held too many memories, too much pain. Each room was a trigger, each corner a reminder of what had happened there. We got a good price. Ironically, the scandal had increased the property's value in the eyes of morbid buyers. With the money, we rented a small apartment on the other side of town near downtown, where no one knew us, where we could start over without the weight of stares and whispers. The move was like a purification ritual. We left behind furniture, objects, everything that might carry the energy of that house, of that man. We bought new things, simple but ours, not contaminated by the past. My mother transformed the living room of the apartment into her sewing workshop. She bought a new, more modern machine and began to accept more complex orders. Wedding dresses, tailored suits, clothes that required technique and patience. I'm thinking of taking a fashion course, she told me one night as she sewed a delicate embroidery. Maybe open my own atelier one day with my name on the door. It was the first time in months that I saw her dreaming about the future. It was like seeing a flower growing through concrete, unlikely but beautiful in its resilience. I also began to rebuild myself piece by piece. I went back to drawing, a hobby I had abandoned during the years of abuse. I started writing in a diary, pouring onto the pages feelings I still couldn't fully verbalize. School continued to be a challenge, but I found refuge in the library. Among books, no one looked at me strangely or whispered behind my back. There I could lose myself in other lives, other stories, temporarily escape my own reality. It was in the library that I met Robert, the new literature teacher. Recently graduated, full of innovative ideas, he organized a book club that quickly became my favorite moment of the week. "You have a very interesting critical eye," he told me after a discussion about Mark Twain. "Have you ever thought about studying literature?" I had never thought much about the future. For years, my only concern had been surviving the present. But that question opened a door I didn't know existed. A future, possibilities, choices maybe, I replied, feeling a spark of hope light up somewhere inside me. As 1974 progressed, our new life began to take shape. The apartment, once strange and impersonal, now had our style. Plants in the windows, pictures on the walls, the smell of home cooking permeating the rooms. A home, not just a place to live. My mother's sewing workshop prospered. She made clothes for the wives of the most important men in the city, creating a reputation for excellence and discretion. Some of these women became more than clients. They became friends, confidants, support in difficult times. I had improved in therapy, although I still had bad days. The nightmares were less frequent, the panic attacks more controllable. I began to prepare for college entrance exams, dreaming of university, of a career, of a life that was truly mine. In August 1974, we received news that shook our newly won stability. My father had filed for a sentence review claiming good behavior and remorse. "He can't get out," I panicked upon hearing the news. "Not after just 1 year, not after everything he did." "He won't get out," my mother promised, with a determination that left no room for doubt. "I'll hire the best lawyer. I'll go to the press if necessary. He will serve every day of those 12 years. And so she did. She saved, worked overtime, sold jewelry she still kept from her married days, and hired Mr. Davidson, a renowned criminal lawyer. Together they gathered evidence, testimonies, everything that could ensure the request would be denied. In November, the judge's response came. Request denied. My father would remain in prison, serving his sentence in full. It was another moment of relief, another small victory in our journey of reconstruction. But the psychological impact of that scare was great. I realized that even imprisoned, he still had power over us. He could still generate fear, anxiety, destabilize the fragile peace we had built. "I don't want to live like this," I confided to Dr. Martha in a session. "I don't want every news about him, every legal move, every year that passes to make me relive everything again." "And how do you want to live?" she asked in that gentle but provocative tone she used when she wanted me to reflect more deeply. The question caught me off guard. How did I want to live? I had never really thought about it. I had been so busy surviving that I forgot to imagine what it would really be like to live. "I want to be free," I finally replied. "Free from him, free from fear, free from the past. And what do you need to achieve that freedom?" The answer didn't come immediately. I spent days thinking about it, reflecting on what it really meant to be free. Until I understood forgiveness, not forgiveness for him. I could never forgive what he did, but forgiveness for myself. Forgiveness for not having told earlier. For having endured in silence, for all the times I blamed myself for what wasn't my fault, and forgiveness for my mother too. Genuine forgiveness, not just empty words to make her feel better. Forgiveness for not seeing, for not noticing, for bringing that man into our lives. This was the most difficult step in my healing journey. more difficult than the testimonies, than the sleepless nights, than the looks of pity. Forgiving required a strength I wasn't sure I possessed, but I tried. Day after day I tried, and gradually I felt the burden getting lighter, the chains loosening, the air entering my lungs more easily. At Christmas 1974, my mother and I celebrated together in our small apartment. It was our first, truly, our own celebration. Without shadows of the past hovering over us, we prepared a simple but love-filled dinner, decorated a small tree with handmade ornaments, exchanged modest but meaningful gifts. To new beginnings she toasted at midnight, raising a glass of cider. To new beginnings, I repeated, feeling for the first time that this was really possible. The year 1975 dawned with a promise of novelties. I would turn 18 in July, finish high school in December, take the entrance exams for literature. My mother would start her technical fashion course, expand the workshop, maybe hire an assistant. We were rebuilding our lives piece by piece, day by day. The road was still long, the challenges still many, but for the first time since that fateful night of August 1973, we looked forward with hope instead of fear. And that perhaps was our greatest victory. The following years were of reconstruction and discoveries. In July 1975, I turned 18, officially an adult before the law, although I had already felt aged inside for a long time. My mother organized a small party in our apartment with only a few close friends and her dearest clients. "A toast to my daughter," she said, raising a glass of cheap wine, which in that moment seemed like the finest champagne. The bravest woman I've ever known. I cried upon hearing those words. I had never considered myself brave, just a survivor doing what I needed to move forward. But that night, surrounded by people who truly loved me, I began to see my own strength. The college entrance exams came in December as planned. I studied like never before, turning books into refuge, knowledge into a shield. On the morning of the test, my mother hugged me at the campus gate. "The result doesn't matter," she whispered in my ear. "We've already won much harder battles than this." She was right, of course. After everything we had been through, a test was just that. A test. I entered that room with the serenity of someone who had already faced their worst demons and survived to tell the story. When the results came out in February 1976, my name was on the list of those approved for the literature course at the State University. My mother framed the page of the newspaper with the list and hung it on the living room wall next to her certificate from the technical fashion course she had completed the previous month. "Look at us," she said, admiring our small trophies. "Who would have thought, huh? Who would have thought?" Indeed. In less than 3 years, we had transformed a tragedy into momentum to grow. The abuse had not been erased. It never would be. But it was no longer the only thing that defined our lives. College revealed itself to be a new and fascinating world. I fell in love with American literature classes, with heated debates about linguistics, with poetry circles that happened in the campus gardens. For the first time since childhood, I felt genuine pleasure in being alive, in learning, in dreaming. It was in the second semester that I met Edward. He was studying law on the same campus, a tall young man with glasses and a gentle smile who attended the same literature study group as me. We started as colleagues talking about books and movies, sharing opinions about professors, discussing the classics we both loved. "You have a special way of analyzing female characters," he commented one day after I presented a paper on Hester Prynne. "As if you could see layers that no one else sees." I smiled without answering. Of course, I saw invisible layers to others. I had spent years deciphering silences, interpreting looks, reading between the lines to survive. Our friendship grew slowly, organically. Edward was different from any young man I had ever met. Respectful, patient, never invading my space or forcing situations. When he finally invited me out almost a year after we met, it was with a delicacy that completely disarmed me. "I completely understand if you don't want to," he added after the invitation, seeming genuinely concerned about my comfort. "We can continue just as friends." I hesitated. The trauma was still there, buried, but alive, making my heart race at the thought of getting romantically close to a man. Dr. Martha and I had worked a lot on this topic during therapy, but theory was different from practice. "Can I think about it?" I asked, my voice lower than normal. "All the time you need," he replied without pressure, without apparent disappointment. I talked with my mother that night while she adjusted a wedding dress in the living room. "I'm afraid," I confessed. "What if I can't? What if the past is always there between us?" She stopped sewing and looked at me with that mixture of love and sadness that had become so familiar in her eyes. "The fear will be there, honey. I won't lie to you, but don't let it decide your life. You've already given too much power to fear." I decided to accept Edward's invitation. Our first date was at a cafe near campus, a public, busy, safe place. We talked about literature, about our families. I only mentioned that my parents were separated, about our professional dreams. "I want to be a teacher," I revealed, surprising myself with the clarity of this desire. "Help children discover worlds through books." "You would be an amazing teacher," he said. And there was sincerity in his voice. "I want to be a criminal lawyer. Defend those who can't defend themselves." Something in those words touched a sensitive chord in me. I remembered Mr. Davidson, the lawyer who had helped us keep my father in prison. How his work had been fundamental to our safety, our peace of mind. Our relationship evolved at the pace I could handle. Edward never pressured me, never demanded more than I was ready to give. When I told him about my past almost a year after we started dating, he cried with me, held my hands, promised he would never hurt me. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said, echoing without knowing my mother's words. "And if you allow me, I want to spend the rest of my life helping to heal these wounds." In 1979, news shook our fragile sense of security. My father had obtained a sentence reduction for good behavior and would be released in a few months. The news hit me like a punch to the stomach. The nightmares, which had considerably diminished, returned full force. "He can't find us," I told my mother in panic. "He can't know where we are." Edward, already graduated and working in a law firm, helped us get a restraining order. My father could not approach us, could not try to contact us, could not even stay in the same city. "It's the most the law allows," Edward explained, frustrated with the system's limitations, "but I'll make sure it's strictly enforced." It was in this moment of crisis that Edward proposed to me, not in a traditional romantic way with candlelight dinner and a ring in a champagne flute. It was on a common afternoon while we were researching legal ways to protect ourselves. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not out of fear, not for protection, but because I want to build a life with you. A life where the past doesn't define the future." Mal. I looked at this man who had entered my life so unexpectedly, who had been patient and respectful, who never treated me as a victim or as damaged, and for the first time I allowed myself to imagine a truly happy future. "Yes," I answered, tears flowing freely. "I want to build that future with you." We married in a simple ceremony in January 1980. Only close friends, some colleagues from my mother's workshop, professors from college who had become important mentors. I wore a dress made by my mother, of course, her most precious gift on which she worked for months, sewing not only fabric but hopes and blessings into every stitch. "Be happy, my daughter," she said while adjusting my veil. "Be so happy that the past seems just a distant nightmare." Our apartment was in Chicago, where Edward had secured a position at a large law firm specializing in human rights. Leaving Springfield was painful. It meant separating from my mother for the first time, but she insisted it was the best path. "I'll visit you often," she promised, "and you'll have your own life, your own space. That's how it should be." The first months of marriage were a constant learning experience, learning to trust, to lower my guard, to accept love without fear. Edward was my partner in this journey, respecting my limits, celebrating each small victory over trauma. I got my first job as a teacher at an elementary school in the Chicago suburbs. Children from humble families, many with life stories as difficult as, or more difficult than mine. I found purpose there, using my own scars to recognize silenced pains, to offer the support that I myself had taken so long to find. In 1982, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a storm of contradictory emotions: joy, fear, hope, terror. What if I didn't know how to be a mother? What if my past interfered with how I would raise my child? "You'll be a wonderful mother precisely because of your past, not despite it," Edward assured me, holding my trembling hands. "You know more than anyone the importance of protecting, respecting, loving unconditionally." My mother came to live with us in the last months of pregnancy. Her workshop in Springfield had prospered to the point where she could leave it in the care of her assistants for a few months. Her presence was a balm for my insecurities. "I'm so afraid of failing as a mother," I confessed one night, caressing my huge belly. "How did you have the courage to have me, knowing how scary the world is?" "Motherhood is an act of faith, daughter," she replied, her eyes shining with a wisdom that only years can bring. "Faith that despite everything that can go wrong, something wonderful will emerge." Raphael was born in March 1983, a healthy boy with his father's eyes, and according to my mother, my same upturned nose. The moment I placed him in my arms, something healed inside me. Not completely. Some wounds are too deep to close entirely, but enough to feel that a cycle had been broken. "I'll protect you," I whispered to that small being sleeping in my arms. "I'll love you as you deserve to be loved. I'll teach you to be a good, kind, respectful man." Edward cried by my side, touching the son's little head with reverence. "We're a family now," he said. "A family built on love, not on fear." 2 years later, in 1985, our family grew with the arrival of Julia, a girl with dark curls and a smile that lit up the entire room. My heart, which had already expanded with Raphael's birth, seemed like it wouldn't fit in my chest anymore. I then decided that my greatest mission would be to raise my children. I quit my job at the school, opting to be a full-time mother. It wasn't an easy decision. I loved teaching, loved making a difference in those children's lives. But I felt I needed to be present in every moment of my children's childhood, offering the security and love that had been torn from my own childhood. "Are you sure?" Edward asked, concerned that I might regret it. "We can hire a nanny, find a middle ground." "I'm sure," I replied with a conviction that left no room for doubt. "I want to give them what I didn't have. A protected, safe childhood full of love." My mother supported my decision, although she returned to Springfield to manage her workshop. She visited us regularly, bringing handmade clothes for the grandchildren, stories of her increasingly full life. "You know what makes me most proud of you," she told me during one of these visits. "Watching me breastfeed Julia, that you didn't let him win, that you built something beautiful out of so much pain. In 1988, we received the news that my father had died in prison. A sudden heart attack, they said. I felt neither joy nor sadness, just a strange emptiness, as if a chapter had finally been closed, a door definitively locked. "How are you?" Edward asked that night after the children were asleep. "At peace," I replied after reflecting. Not because he's gone, but because now I know for certain that he can never hurt anyone again. Life went on. Edward built a brilliant career as a lawyer, specializing in cases of child abuse and domestic violence. His personal experience through my story gave him a rare sensitivity in his profession. The children grew up healthy, happy, surrounded by love and clear boundaries. Raphael, so much like his father in intelligence and kindness. Julia, a curious mix of my stubbornness and Edward's patience, both raised to respect, to protect, to make the world a better place. In 1995, my mother was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. The news fell like a bomb in our lives. She, who had been my pillar of strength, my savior, my best friend, now needed me. "Come to Chicago," I begged on the phone. "The best doctors are here. We can take care of you." "I'm too old to start over, honey," she replied, her voice weak but determined. "I prefer to stay in my little corner, surrounded by what I've built." I respected her decision, though with a broken heart. I started traveling to Springfield every 2 weeks, taking the grandchildren to brighten her days, helping with chemotherapy that left her so weak, cooking her favorite recipes that she no longer had the strength to prepare. It was during these trips that I began to tell my story to her in a different way, no longer as a victim, but as a survivor, no longer with shame, but with the clarity of someone who understands that the blame was never hers. "You know what I learned from all this, Mom?" I said one afternoon as we knitted together, a hobby she had taught me, that the greatest revenge against those who try to destroy us is to live a full, happy, meaningful life. She smiled, her eyes tired but still bright. "You've always been wiser than me, daughter, since you were little." In August 1996, my mother passed away silently during sleep, as if not wanting to cause trouble even in her departure. The pain was indescribable. Losing the person who had sacrificed everything to protect me, who had rebuilt her life from scratch to give me a future. At the funeral, as I watched her coffin descend into the earth, I made a silent promise. I would continue her legacy of strength, protection, unconditional love, not just with my children, but with anyone who crossed my path needing help. The following years were of consolidation. Raphael graduated in medicine, determined to help traumatized children. Julia followed her father's footsteps in law with a special focus on women's rights. Both knew my story. I told them when they reached the appropriate age without graphic details, but with the truth necessary to understand where my overtly protection came from. My occasional moments of panic, my insistence on values such as respect and consent. "You're the strongest woman I know, Mom," Julia told me after hearing my story. "Now I understand why you dedicated your life to us." "It wasn't a sacrifice," I replied, caressing her face so similar to mine in youth. "It was a choice. The best choice I ever made." Edward and I grew old together, our love maturing like good wine. He never ceased to be the gentle and respectful man I met in college, never made me feel less because of my scars, never treated me as fragile or broken. "You know what I love most about you?" he asked me one night, already with grey hair and wrinkles around his eyes. "Your ability to transform pain into love, to use your wounds to heal others." And here I am now, at 68, Grandma Lena, to 5 wonderful grandchildren, sharing my story publicly for the first time. Not for sensationalism, not for pity, but in the hope that it might help other Marlenas out there suffering in silence, thinking they're alone, that there's no way out. There is a way out, my dears. There is healing. There is a new beginning. There is life, full, meaningful, beautiful, even after the worst trauma. I don't say it's easy. I don't say the scars disappear completely. But they can transform from symbols of pain into medals of courage. If you're watching this and identified with my story, know that you're not alone, that you deserve help, deserve protection, deserve love, that what happened to you doesn't define who you are or who you can become. My dears, if this story touched your heart, please leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Each subscription, each like helps this grandma here to take her message to more people who need to hear that there is hope, that there is healing, that there are new beginnings. I especially love hearing from you in the comments. Let me know which state you're watching from. It makes me feel less alone in sharing this difficult journey. If you've watched this far, just comment Amen below to let me know my story reached you. My story is one of many at Grandparents' Tales. Every week we share real-life experiences from grandparents who, like me, have transformed their pain into strength and their traumas into wisdom. Our community understands what it means to rebuild a life after difficult experiences. A loving embrace from this grandma who learned that our scars, when accepted and understood, don't weaken us. They give us a special kind of strength that only those who have survived the worst can understand. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, no matter what darkness you've experienced, there is always a path to light.